We have got 5 strategies for you today that are going to help you win your fantasy league championships this season in the second half. Definitely a little bit of a different video. We always talk about draft strategy, but there are ways that you can help yourself win your fantasy leagues in the second half of the season. Whether it's trades, whether it's overall philosophy, we've got 5 ways that we're going to do this. So let's get started with, I think one that's really, really important for people is the season's gone on for about 10 weeks now.
Yep.
There are players that just aren't playing well that you need to be willing to, potentially drop, move on from. Who are those type of guys then, Jared, right now, just off the top of your head?
A lot of the guys like Julio Jones, Mike Davis, Allen Robinson, guys that just, you might be putting them in your lineup every week and then they put up 6 points. It's like, you don't want that in your team.
Exactly.
You need those high upside guys who at least have safer floors in them too.
Yeah, and then there's players like Kenny Golladay who's come back from injury, but really, he just got back. How involved is he going to be? You don't need to give these players a lot of runway. If they're not playing well, be willing to drop them, be willing to move on, especially for those of you that are maybe in 10-team leagues or for some 12-team leagues, that there's a good amount of waiver wire players that you can put into your lineups, be willing to do that. Someone like Mike Williams as well, who struggled a lot the last 4 or 5 weeks. If it continues, there's only so much time left. These guys can't hurt you that badly if you're dropping them and moving to someone that you might like better moving forward. Yeah. Even, Adrian Peterson, who's splitting time with Deonta Foreman, if he's going to be outsnapped by him, then why would you bother having him on your roster if you can find someone that gives you some better value?
I agree. And now we're also through most of the bye weeks. I think there's only 12 teams left that have a bye week.
Yeah, there's only 2 teams on bye this week.
Yeah, so a lot of your players are probably already past that. So you won't be needing to switch out players all the time. So you can fill up that bench with guys who maybe have higher upside or other pieces like that.
Yeah, exactly. Second part here is on Sundays, we've talked about this a few weeks ago, but on Sunday, you might find yourself looking at some players that you've maybe never put into your starting lineup this season or just constantly been on your bench. Get those players off your roster, off your bench, and go look at handcuff running backs that you can put onto your bench that maybe have some upside, that if an injury happens, they're immediately providing you great value the rest of the way. So who are a few of those players?
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen some of them, like Ramondre Stevenson last week.
Yep.
Devontae Booker's been a very good fill-in for Saquon Barkley. He's had like 90% of the touches and snap share on that offense. Another one that now would have been a huge bonus if you had him on your team was A.J. Dillon. He's likely already rostered.
Yep.
But he's going to have that entire backfield to himself most likely until Aaron Jones comes back. So these are the kind of guys that have that high upside that you want on your bench.
Yeah.
And if the starter goes down, all of a sudden you've got a plug and play flex guy at the very least.
Yeah, and on Sunday mornings you could even see some people that they have a few other players that end up being inactive and they're sitting on their bench. They need to pick somebody up and they end up dropping an Alexander Mattison, a Tony Pollard because they really needed that start. Be able to find a guy that you can drop to pick that type of player up. It might not ever work out for you. He might never be the starter, but it's certainly worth the investment and worth the shot because these guys can completely change your team the rest of the way. Like I said, Alexander Mattison, Tony Pollard are huge. Even Sony Michel, I don't know if you mentioned him, could be like that.
Yeah, Sony Michel too.
Kalen Ballage, I know the Steelers can't really run the ball, but I do think Najee Harris goes down. He would probably be the next guy up. Samaje Perine, of course, with the Bengals. That's a big one. I'm really big on the rest of the way. It's an important one.
Yeah. So especially if you're not going to be losing that much value with dropping some of these other guys like that we've mentioned, like the Allen Robinsons and Mike Davis, AJ Greens, just those guys don't need to be on your roster. It won't be a bad thing if you drop them and lose their value because they're not going to provide you much better value than so many other guys. So you might as well risk it with the high upside. Because remember, only one person wins the championship at the end of the day.
Yep. Hopefully it's me though.
Yeah. No.
In most leagues we're in together. Before we get to the last few, if you guys enjoy the video, be sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel. We're posting this type of content all the time, so definitely subscribe. Comment down below if you're putting these to use. The next one here is trade. Some of you guys are coming up to your trade deadlines. For some, it might be this week. For some, it might be in the next week or two. Don't be afraid to make a trade that you could, you could be wrong. You could get it wrong. You could make a trade for somebody and it doesn't work out, but that might be the only thing holding you back. There are players that are, that are out there that have a better schedule. They might not be a better player, but they have a better schedule. And really there's only so much time left in the season that, taking the thought process of, well, this guy's just better. He's, over the course of time, he's going to give me a better output. Schedule can be huge the next 5-6 weeks of the season. So we talked about it on the show earlier this week with the running back rankings. Najee Harris, Christian McCaffrey is actually a trade we would make. We would trade Christian McCaffrey for
we've
Najee
talked
Harris.
about it. Like, we have Najee Harris at 1 because his schedule is so easy, and McCaffrey's playoff schedule is as hard as it could possibly get. He's got Buffalo, he's got the Saints, he's got the Bucks.
Yeah.
So McCaffrey's still obviously a great play for the rest of the season, but somebody will likely give you Najee Harris for Christian McCaffrey, and I'd be willing to make that trade for him.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of guys like that. Like, you have so many guys who have very easy schedules down the stretch. Those are the kind of guys you need on your roster because they have the highest upside to win those playoff weeks. And usually I don't like to look into that as much at the beginning of the season because we truly don't know who's going to be the easy defenses, the hard defenses.
Yeah.
But now we're in a position, we know who the hard defenses are. We know who's got the easy matchups. So now you take advantage of it.
Yeah, and we've got a sample size to learn from all these defenses. It's likely they're going to continue to play how they've been playing if they have been for 10 weeks, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Another one that came to mind for me, I did think just like the Panthers have a tough schedule, the Bucks do too because they have a stretch of the Bills, Saints, and Panthers. And the Panthers and the Bills secondaries have played really, really well this season. I think they're top 3 in pass DVOA this season defensively.
Yeah.
So I'm not really big on the Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. For Mike Evans, who's had a great year so far, Keenan Allen, I think, has a great schedule near the end of the season. That's a trade I would make. Maybe you wouldn't make that at the beginning of the season, but now with knowing what's in front of them and in this stretch, definitely I would be willing to do that as well.
Yeah, and Keenan Allen's really come on the past few weeks too. He's really taken over because before it was him and Mike Williams kind of splitting a little bit, but Mike Williams has fallen off. It's all going Keenan Allen.
Yeah,
now.
a lot of volume for him too, which is always good. Second to last one here. If you are at or below 500, this is probably just two and one here, but we'll start with if you're at or below 500 battling for that last playoff spot. Those injured players, unfortunately, if they are really good, they might be the better player, but at the end of the day, they're not on the field. And if they're not helping you make the playoffs,
it doesn't matter if they're on your team when you're not in the playoffs.
Exactly. So what are a few that come to mind for you?
Aaron Jones is a big one. Obviously, they're saying 1 to 2 weeks. I feel like that's probably not true. They do have a bye week in week 13 too.
Yep.
So even if he comes back in week 14, it might be too late at that point. If you miss him the next 3 weeks, he's not going to help you very much. So Aaron Jones for someone like Elijah Mitchell, Javonte Williams, although it sounds like you're losing that trade, those guys are going to help you win and get into the playoffs more than Aaron Jones will. So if you're in a position where you need to win at least 75% of the remaining games, absolutely go make that trade.
Yeah, it might suck because you might be making that trade with a guy who is in the fantasy playoffs already, who's maybe hasn't lost this year, lost once or twice, and you're making his team better.
Yeah.
But that's the risk you got to take.
Yeah. But also remember in the playoffs, any team can win in any given week.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. So once you're in, anybody can win.
I have a few more. I think there's probably 2 or 3 here. Antonio Brown, I know he's been dealing with injury, the walking boot, the not at practice yet. How long does this linger? Maybe he's someone you have to give up on because you're not able to wait any longer. And he's been a big part of your team this year. If you need someone who can play, I think Rashad Bateman's has been playing really, really well and seems to kind of be ascending each and every week. I'd be willing to do that if I do need someone I could be playing this week and I'm stuck scouring on the wire for guys like Jamison Crowder or who's another one that comes to mind. If we're looking at like
AJ Green,
Emmanuel Sanders, AJ Green, even Jarvis Landry, I think would be a trade I'd make for Antonio Brown because there's an opportunity for good volume for him too.
I especially love the Rashad Bateman one just because now is the time of year where rookies finally are getting a full workload in their offenses.
Yeah.
Usually a lot of breakouts happen for them at this point of the year. So
yeah,
I
that's
like
a good
Rashad.
point.
He could even take over Marquise Brown. I wouldn't be surprised. It looked like he was the better player of the two on Thursday, at least when they played last week.
Mm-hmm. Same goes, you mentioned Rashad Bateman, but Elijah Moore too. Same
Elijah
thing,
Moore.
He's looked better. Kareem Hunt is another person that we're just kind of waiting on to figure out what's going to happen. He hasn't practiced. They said he's ready to start practicing, right? You had said?
Yeah.
So even guys like Josh Jacobs, Damian Harris, if I needed, I would pull the trigger on it, even though Kareem Hunt could come back and be as good as he was this season. That's another one. Calvin Ridley, I mean, anything you want to say on that situation if somebody has him?
Honestly, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if Calvin Ridley doesn't play the rest of the season.
Right.
So you might have to take a little bit less for Calvin Ridley. Like T. Higgins, I would 100% take over Calvin Ridley at this point.
Yeah.
Probably in pretty much any situation, unless you're like a complete lock for like a top 2 seed.
Yeah, somebody offered me in a league I was in, I have Calvin Ridley, and he offered me DJ Moore. And I was like, yeah, I don't love DJ Moore. I talked about him on the show last week saying that I'm worried about him the rest of the way. But DJ Moore's on the field.
Yeah.
So
a lot better for you than Calvin Ridley will be.
Yeah, so that you could be surprised. Some people could actually find that going for a guy like Calvin Ridley gives them so much upside if he's back that they're willing to trade a good player for him. So I would pull the trigger on that.
For sure.
And then the last one you wanted to mention in terms of strategies about defenses.
Yeah, or quickly, we'll mention first the opposite.
Yeah. The opposite.
If you are in a position where you are 9-1, 8-2, guaranteed to make the playoffs, look to trade for these guys who might be injured right now.
Yeah.
Aaron Jones, great one to acquire. Some of the guys we talked about again, like Antonio Brown. If you can give up some of your maybe RB2 types, or wide receiver 2 types to upgrade for somebody who's not going to play right now, but will be in the playoffs, that's what I look for. You remember, you don't need to be the number 1 seed. Sure, it's nice to get the bye. Always a great advantage to get the bye, but getting in there is all that matters, and having the best possible team when you're there, that's how you're going to win.
You're lucky enough that your team's played well the whole season, so this is an advantage you get, right? Defenses.
Yeah, defense. I wanted to mention, this is about the time now where you should look to, if you're in a league with defenses, you should look towards their playoff schedules. Usually people take it week by week. They'll see who's the best defense available.
I've played with people who will stash multiple defenses on their bench for well in advance.
Really?
It almost seems like a race to be able to do this on some of my leagues.
Yeah, this is about the time I usually look at it. Most teams don't, and it really depends on how deep your bench is too.
Yeah.
But if you have the bench space, I would, even if there's 3 different defenses for each of the 3 playoff weeks and you have the space, do it.
Yeah.
Like having a defense that plays on some shitty team like Detroit or the Jets, that's going to give you such an advantage over somebody who has been using the same defense this entire year. It could be the difference between 10 and 15 fantasy points. So a couple I did want to mention, the Chargers, week 16 and 17, the playoff semifinals and finals, they play the Texans and the Broncos.
Yeah.
So that's a great couple matchups there for them. Both of them I would be 100% willing to start them. And then the other one was the Seahawks. They play the Bears and the Lions.
Yeah, that's good there.
2 great ones. And those are 2 defenses who are likely available. They're not ones like Buffalo or Tampa that people have been holding on to this whole year.
Yeah.
They're likely available in your league. You can go pick them up right now. So
that's a good point.
If you were in a spot where you're probably going to make the playoffs, and if you're not going to make the playoffs, then you're probably not even watching this video.
Yeah, that's true. That's why the views sometimes can tail down at this point. You haven't won, so you're not looking for the advice. But we can, you know what? You might be a few games below 500. I think we can still help you.
Yeah, but going back to that thing said at the beginning, if you have one of those guys literally putting up 8 points a week like Allen Robinson, at this point I would rather roster the Chargers defense than Allen Robinson.
If you're in a good spot, especially if you're in a good spot with your team.
Yeah,
I agree. So, all right, if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like I mentioned earlier, subscribe to the channel, comment down below if we missed something, or if you want some advice on some players that could fall under some of these categories we mentioned. Happy to help you out there. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.